Jamil, do you think that this is really all about the fear that there's really going to be Sharia law installed here in the United States?
Well, that's not what Randy Fine or Andy Ogle said. What Andy Ogle said was Muslims don't belong in America, that they have no place here, that they should all go home. Even the ones born here, apparently, should go God knows where, but somewhere, apparently. And Randy Fine said, if it's a choice between dogs and Muslims, I'll take dogs. Now, I have 3 dogs. I love my dogs, right? But we're a Muslim household, and we're fine with dogs. It's all good.
I have to choose between dogs or Randy Fine.
I will say my wife might choose the dogs over me. So, there are some Muslims who might lose out to dogs.
And Speaker Johnson coddling this bigotry, I think, is the other part of the story, to be honest.
A few things. First of all, my grandpa moved from Syria in the early 80s, and my dad's whole side of the family, they are Muslim. So anti-Muslim bigotry has been around for decades and decades. I will say, my grandpa who moved here, the Muslim community he lives in Indiana, is full of doctors, heart surgeons, people who have helped their community. I also find it very ironic that Republicans are so welcoming to any form of bigotry. They're so welcoming to anti-trans bigotry. They're so welcoming to anti-Muslim bigotry. You're making a face, but these are bigoted comments they made. But the moment that bigotry is targeted towards them, they freak the hell out. You have to stop any bigotry before it enters your movement. I just find it funny when Randy Fine will be super Islamophobic, but then he'll be on the floor whenever something is directed at Jewish people, which, by the way, you should never be bigoted towards anybody. Stop the bigotry before it enters your movement. But how do you only micro-focus on for certain forms of bigotry? I just don't.
What I find ironic is, so supposedly some of these comments are as a result of the attempt against Mayor Mamdani in New York, who was raised Muslim, was he not? Himself. Yeah. So they're being anti-Muslim and they're finally defending Mamdani over something.
To be clear, the attack wasn't on Mayor Mamdani. It was on people protesting. It was attacking protesters, people protesting Mamdani.
Right by his house.
To frame it as an anti-Muslim attack would actually completely reverse what happened. Someone who shouted Allah Akbar threw a bomb that didn't go off at the protesters.
Republicans are finally doing something in defense of a Muslim, in this case, Mamdani.
As a Republican,
but let me just finish this point. I don't think there's anything any Republican in Congress could do right now that would get condemned by Mike Johnson, because the practical thing is he has got a 1-vote cushion, a 1-vote margin, because Thomas Massie often votes against Republicans. And so, we saw him for the last couple of weeks stay mum and not condemn Tony Gonzalez and make him resign, despite that he had been having an affair with a staffer who ended up dousing herself with gasoline and setting herself on fire and dying. And so there is nothing that any Republican can do right now that Mike Johnson is going to condemn.
Is that true, that Mike Johnson will not draw a line anywhere, even here?
What Mike Johnson said is he said people who refuse to assimilate and follow a radical ideology that seeks to commit violence and terrorist acts have no business being in the country. I think most people would.
Well, that's not what he was asked about. People would agree with that. He was asked about 2 congressmen who said Muslims have no place in American society, and one of them saying, as Jamil points out, that if it's a choice between dogs and Muslims, it's not a difficult one. He wasn't asked about people with radical ideologies. He was asked about Muslims.
But the only reason
obviously
the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful.
I think it's a great tactic to try to answer a different question than was asked. But the actual question is there a line anywhere right now on Capitol Hill or elsewhere in the Republican movement when it comes to anti-Muslim?
I can't speak for Mike Johnson, but I would say we've had 2 terrorist attacks here in the last 10 days.
What does that have to do with Muslims?
So can we condemn those? Why are we?
Of course. What does that have to do with Muslims?
What does that have to do with Muslims?
There is a radical strain of Islam that's led to these terrorist attacks. Obviously, the vast majority of Muslims are
people with terroristic ideologies here and all around the world. What does that have to do with whether Muslims belong in American society as a group?
Yeah, and let's be clear.
I'd like to hear the answer.
I'm talking about what Mike Johnson was saying.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what he didn't say.
But you haven't read his full quote.
What I'm talking about is what he didn't say.
Islamic extremism without compromising our commitment to religious liberty. He was chiding those two members of Congress. And by the way, as a Republican,
was he?
As a Republican, I believe that the same. I believe that the same amendment.
There are strong language.
The same amendment that gives those two members of Congress.
Or is it bigotry, Joe?
The same amendment that gives those two members of Congress the right to say things that are offensive, that I find actually offensive as well, is the same amendment that permits Muslim people to be here proudly and
nobody said that Mike Johnson should throw them in jail. I think the question was, is he going to clearly say that they crossed a line? And he characterized it as he basically characterized it as strong language.
I think
it's not strong language.
I think he said the language they use is very wrong.
Okay, what you just said, he didn't say.
I read what he said. He said, we can be tough on Islamic extremism without compromising our commitment to religious liberty.
You were going to say.
I mean, look, as a Muslim Republican who worked for the Bush administration on counterterrorism matters, I can tell you there are tons of Muslims who oppose Islamist ideology, who oppose ISIS, who oppose throwing bombs at Americans, and the Speaker of the House should just say that. The Speaker of the House should represent the real Republican Party, not the BS Republican Party of Andy Ogles, who's a racist Islamophobe. Okay, or the BS Republican Party of Randy Fine, who compares any religious sect to dogs. It's not appropriate. The Speaker should just say it. Now, it's true. He has a thin margin. He's in a very tough position. It may be hard to say certain things, but it should be easy in this country, in a country that believes in the First Amendment, that believes in the freedom of religion, to say those kind of remarks are wrong. They should be condemned. It's not a hard thing. Mike Johnson's a smart guy. He's a lawyer. He knows what he's saying. He knows that he's playing games with words. He should stop.
And the other thing that he could have said is that people should go take a walk around Arlington Cemetery, and particularly now that we are at war and that Donald Trump is putting our service members at risk, and take a look at all of the tombs at Arlington Cemetery that have a crescent moon for the Muslims that have served and lost their lives for this country.
I was going to